Order. I'll let the record show we still have all 7 board members present, as well as the student government representative, Mr. Manuel. As you remember, in prior meetings, this board discussed changing the format for board discussion items so it would allow for voting with these items. After conferring with General Counsel, the superintendent, and the board clerk, we are introducing a new procedure for our board discussion items in today's special meeting. You'll see them located at the end of the regular business in their own category, and we'll discuss it further when we get to BRD 1. We have several sets of minutes to be approved. Do we have a motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Mr. Shaw? Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Items. I keep flipping down here, and this computer screen is not working well. We have one item added, PRR1. It's been added for good cause. Good cause exists to add this item after initial publication of the agenda because this is the last board meeting prior to the scheduled closing date of the transaction, and board approval of the amendment is required to allow the closing to go forward as scheduled. Mr. Superintendent, do you have any items to withdraw?
No, sir. Excuse me. No, Mr. Chairman, I do not.
Board members, we have 3 items that have already been pulled from the agenda, BRD 1, CS2, and CS3. They've been pulled from consent. Does anybody else want to pull anything? We need a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Mrs. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Do we have any disclosures or abstentions? Seeing none. Mr. Superintendent, comments?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The School Board of Palm Beach County is currently celebrating Black History Month. Teachers across the district have organized special events to further enlighten our students and to acknowledge the achievements and contributions of generations of Black Americans. This is also a time to recognize there is still injustice and inequality in our community, but we can pledge to join together to fight against oppression. As a school district, we have the responsibility of ensuring that young people are aware of the sacrifices and achievements of Black people in our country. That is why I'm proud of our district incorporates Black history into our curriculum and is keep pushing to infuse African-American history and the diaspora in our educational system, teaching students about the rich and abundant heritage of Black people. Black history is American history, and we all benefit when everyone is given equal opportunity to achieve the American dream. February is also Career and Technical Education Month. Let's celebrate the value of CTE and shine a light on our district's hundreds of programs and prepare students for in-demand careers with a depth of learning that builds real-world skills. Skills that allow them to enter the workforce here in Palm Beach County or anywhere that they like. As I speak with business leaders and community organizations, many are surprised to learn that our district offers more than 300 career and choice programs and students in kindergarten through 12th grade. I want you to think about that. Students in many of these programs earn industry certifications and have the credentials to enter the workforce and launch a high-paying career right out of high school. Our district works closely with local business partners to ensure that our academies align with future employment needs in Palm Beach County. Last week, the School District of Palm Beach County proudly joined the state in recognizing Celebrate Literacy Week Florida. My ask of all parents is that we make literacy a priority in our home. In addition to reading to your children, encourage them to read to you. There are many creative ways to engage children. In my personal home, when we watch television, we keep closed captioning on so that our children are seeing the words as they appear on the television screen. Reading is the foundation of all learning. K-2 literacy is essentially important. Reading on grade level by 3rd grade sets a child up for academic success throughout their lives. I want to thank you for taking the time to read with a child. And finally, another great success story coming out of the School District of Palm Beach County. On Saturday, right before the Super Bowl, Boynton Beach High School graduate Lamar Jackson was named the NFL's most valuable player for his outstanding season as the quarterback of my favorite team, the Baltimore Ravens. Making this honor especially sweet is the fact that the vote for naming Lamar MVP was absolutely unanimous. Excellence is happening here and has happened here in Palm Beach County Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Mrs. McQuinn? Mrs. Whitfield?
I just want to point out that was a District 4 high school, Boynton Beach High School with Lamar Jackson. Thank you.
You got a Heisman Trophy winner too, huh?
Is it your only one, Mrs. Whitfield? Ms. Brill?
Well, some of us only have one high school, and a shout out to Park Vista, who had their students performing at the Super Bowl at halftime. So shout out to them. I wasn't going to make any comments, but listening to Dr. FENNOY talk about literacy and talking about the closed captioning on the television made me think of something which some parents may not think about. But just as you know, I have one of my children has a disability, and he has struggled with learning to read. And what we did is he got older when he didn't want mom to read to him, is we got recordings of the books. So he read Harry Potter while listening to the tape. And I will tell you that he's fully literate today. So there are other ways, too, that you can help your child to learn to read that's age appropriate. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. Mrs. Andrews?
And just a couple of things. I'd like to congratulate Cypress Trails Elementary, celebrated 30 years being in Palm Beach County, 30 years as an absolutely fabulous school. And today I had an opportunity to go over to Pahokee to see the football players do their signings. It's so important, academic achievement as well as being a real true sports hero, and those students that signed on today with those colleges, it was really great. So yes, we're growing them here in Palm Beach County, academically as well as athletically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Andrews. Dr. Robinson? Nothing? Mr. Shaw? All right, speakers, we actually have one on the list, but I understand that there was a couple speakers here for the workshop that didn't understand that they couldn't speak there. So if the board has no objection, we'll let them speak. So Mr. Norman from Florida Charter School Alliance, you want to come up to the are you here? Mr. Norman? Lynn Norman. Oh, Miss Norman. Okay, so there was a couple people that we didn't get their names that wanted to speak. Yeah, would you come up to that podium right there and tell us who you are, please?
Member of the school board, my name is Ira Rabb. I'm here on behalf of the League of Women Voters. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you on this very important subject. I have also with me my son Michael, who is a former president of the school board of Freeport, New York. I'm sure some of you have heard of it. I want to thank you for all of the things I've heard today. And Rich Bartholomew, who is the chair of the League of Women Voters Complete Count Committee, asked me to come here and thank you on his behalf, and I'm doing that as well. One of the problems that we have is the word fear. Some of the public are very much afraid to get involved in the census. They fear government. And there are three types of people that they do not fear. One is the church and the church people. Another one are their doctors, and the other one is their schools. So you have the opportunity to break that fear so that people would take a chance and go through the census process without the fear. The other thing is I heard somebody indicate that they wanted to have a contest for posters. I might also suggest you might consider an essay contest. And also in the English classes, to have the English teachers have the children write compositions on the importance of the census, especially in the middle schools and in the high schools. And my son wants to say a few things as well. Thank you.
Thank you. He's surprised.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michael Rabb. I do come from a strong family of value of education, and the one thing I do want to mention, again, regarding the word trust, is we trust. In other words, if we as a school district say we trust the census, that puts that message out, and the way we did that was we put out posters on, we put banners on our schools' fences saying we trust the census. So that could be another part of your dialogue. And I just want to address the young man from the student body. This is probably one of the most important efforts that you as a school government can contribute for the next 10 years of your students' population by understanding that the importance of every one of those federally funded public services, whether they be agencies, whether they be infrastructure, whether they be programs, they're all decided based upon the population count. The more people that you count, the more funds come in, and it is something that you're investing in your own, into your first and second graders will be in that same position as you are in by the time the next census comes around. So it's really important for you to pass that down to the next generation. And that's all I really want to say. This is something that, the other thing I want to mention is this school district is doing one heck of a job by tying this into curriculum and outreach. This should become a model, and somebody should really write it up and let them know what your effort was here in Palm Beach County for other districts. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, board members, before we approve the consent agenda, could somebody, I'd like somebody to make a motion to allow Mr. Manuel's BRD item to move to right under BRD 1 so that he doesn't have to stay here all evening. Mr. Shaw made the motion, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. So the agenda is modified to put that one up a little higher on the list. That takes us to the approval of the consent agenda. Board members, do you have any items you want to pull from consent? Seeing none, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Ms. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So now we're on the first item of new business.
You have to go down to the next category. To category under new business.
So under 12, we're not.
It's not under 12. It's under 13. Board discussion items.
Okay. So the first item will be the board discussion item, new board discussion platform. So based on the prior discussions we've had and our general counsel getting very, very nervous about us voting on things we're not supposed to vote on at meetings that haven't been advertised, after talking with the general counsel and the superintendent and the board clerk, we've come up with a little change so that nothing will change in the way we submit them to the board office. The board discussion items will still go on the list in the order that they're come into the board office, but they'll be added to this part of the meeting so that they'll be discussed and take action if necessary, so that if there's any action any board member would like to make a motion on part of their discussion, we'll be able to do that at this meeting without freaking out our general counsel. So that's what we're going to be doing. So the only change here is we're moving board discussion items from workshops to special meetings, and I understand from the general counsel's office, who's conferred with the guru of all board policies, that we can do that without a change in the board policy. We can move them from special meetings, from workshops to special meetings without any change in the policy. I guess the policy does provide there'll be discussion items at workshops, but it doesn't prohibit discussion items at special meetings. So at some point we might want to clarify that, but we're not violating board policy by doing it this way. So that'll take us to Mr. President Manuel, BRD 8. So under that one, we have the proclamation that was presented at the January 22nd, 2020 board meeting by President Manuel. So would you like to make us a pitch?
You don't want me to read it, right? No, right?
You've all got a copy of it. Have you all seen it? Yeah.
Okay. So basically, this proclamation was proposed by Wellington High School, as you all know, and it was unanimously decided by all of the high schools in attendance at that Palm Beach County meeting that we would agree with their proposition of replacing styrofoam trays with the biodegradable trays. Some of the research that I found with contacting Ms. Lori Dornbush of the School Food Services Department is that a total of about 31 million meals were served last school year. This included breakfast, lunch, supper, and adult lunches. Out of those, about 13 million were served on styrofoam trays or plates. The resulting 17.7 million were served on reusable, washable trays or on paper boats. So you're really getting only 13 million from styrofoam. That's how many are used throughout the year. The average cost of styrofoam plates is around half a cent, which means the department spends approximately $657,807 each year to purchase the styrofoam plates, but not all of the programs use styrofoam. Elementary schools use reusable trays. Let's see. The price quoted for the biodegradable tray is 0.075 cents, so it's 0.025 more than a styrofoam tray, costing the department an additional it's $986,000, an additional $328,000 a year. So I can't say how much the budget is, but yeah, I really don't know how much that really is in terms of spending-wise, but just taking that into consideration, it's not a huge, you're not doubling the cost by ensuing the reusable the biodegradable trays, and it's a better impact on the environment and pushing for the green schools. This is just another way to make it, using the biodegradable trays rather than styrofoam is just another push for the environmental cause.
All right, so board members, before you ask questions, this was moved, you remember, so that the district had some time to give us some costs so that we could figure out if we wanted to help with this project. So I understand the superintendent has Mrs. Paul going to give us some information.
Oh, I thought he just gave it to you.
He doesn't have the budget.
Well,
How much is it going to cost us?
right now I have Allison looking at the various opportunities. When I was in my previous districts, we were members of the Urban School Food Alliance, and we had this kind of same discussion, and we were able to, dare I say the word, piggyback off the Urban School Food Alliance. It's the six, at the time it was the six largest school districts. As you know, New York has about 1 million kids and so forth. So we're able to drive the price down on the biodegradable trays. So we are looking into that. I know she has a meeting that she's going to, I believe, in Orlando for the Alliance to see, if, what the cost is as of today, and to see how we can kind of move towards that.
Mrs. Whitfield and Mr. Shaw.
Okay, two things. First, I love that you guys are thinking about this. So thrilled. I really can't tell you. We actually had I had an event recently where I invited a bunch of adults to come and eat school food. And one of the comments I got at the end was about this, like, how can you have styrofoam trays? And I was like, oh my goodness, I never even thought about it. So I'm glad we're looking into it. The comment I had was about the organization that's in the Glades called TELUS. I think we need to really reach out to them and see. This would be a huge purchase from them. They might be able to give us a good deal. They actually do compostable trays or compostable plates right now. I don't know if they have a tray manufactured, but that might be something that they could look into. It's a Palm Beach County company, employs Palm Beach County people, and it actually uses sugarcane remnants to make the biodegradable plates. So it might be a really good match made in heaven, and maybe they'll be willing to work with us on the costs. But I want to say thank you so much to Jaden, because this is something that I think we should be doing. If we can remotely afford it, I would love to see it happen. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. It may be worth, if the board approves this proclamation, to ask staff to contact Ron LaFace. And since there are individual member projects going on through the budget process in Tallahassee right now, we might be able to ask Mr. LaFace if there's an opportunity to place an amendment someplace in some legislation that's being proposed as a pilot for us to fund this, at least for 1 year. And I think that it would be good, and I think it would be something that would have some interest at the state level, and use it also as a way to recognize student government for taking the leadership in this. So I think that that's something that staff could handle if we approve this.
Ms. Brill and Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. So first I want to say thank you. I think it's amazing. It's fantastic that students are bringing us better environmental ways for us to serve them. And at that same meeting, I think it was the same meeting, we had 2 young men from Atlantic High School who spoke to us. One, they suggested using sporks instead of forks and spoons. I don't know if you can eliminate knives. That I don't think we're looking at. But the other thing that they suggested was getting rid of the packets of condiments. And in the response that we got back regarding the comments, we were told that that we're looking to possibly pilot that at Atlantic High School. So if we have condiment stations, that might save us some money also to go towards the whole replacement of styrofoam, because I think styrofoam products are horrible. I don't even allow them in my house. So I would fully support at whatever cost it comes out, but we may have that offset with the condiments. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews?
And thank you. I think this is excellent. I'm very pleased. And just about a year ago, I had a person to come to my office who actually is in this business, and it was a minority business. And this is where I learned how New York and some of the big districts were already doing this. And I did refer them to our business office as well as our school food service. But yes, TELUS is great out in the Glades region. And our West Tech students as well as our high school students have actually gone out to visit the company TELUS. And I think Dr. FENNOY, they had invited the school district leaders to come and see TELUS. And it shows you exactly how the material is made from sugarcane, the plates, the forks, and everything. And many of our big activities that we have at the convention center, they're actually utilizing TELUS, the company, to provide these biodegradable plates, spoons, cups, napkins, and it's all made out of sugarcane. So I would love to invite us to do a field trip to see TELUS if you haven't seen it. It's fabulous, and they're on the move. They've been in place in the Glades region now for about 3 years. Thank you.
Dr. Robbins?
So thank you for bringing that to us. I guess I'm just old because I have an old people question, and it doesn't need to be answered now, but when you come back with numbers, environmentally, it seems to me that the best thing for the environment is to not use anything disposable, right? Biodegradables definitely going to be way better than styrofoam, but so in the answer, just tell us, why did people move away from reusable trays? I think I know part of the answer, but just so that I can complete that entire thought. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? So we need a motion to approve the resolution. We're not binding the district to spend the money, but to approve President Jaiden's Manuel's. Okay, motion by Mrs. Andrews, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. If you want to head on out, I know it's a school day for you, so thank you for coming in today. It's not one of your regular meetings, but thanks. The next item is new business. Yep. Yes. BRD1, we're under new business, board members. I recommend the board ratify and approve the appointment of the committee members as shown on the membership list of Board Advisory Committee as submitted. Motion by Mrs. McQuinn, seconded by Ms. Brill. Discussion, Ms. Brill?
Thank you. I just pulled it to let everybody know that my appointee to the Academic Advisory Committee, Sandy Greenberg, resigned a few weeks ago. She's a retired teacher from New York. I am in the process of identifying a recently retired teacher from my district to appoint in her place.
All right. Any more discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. CS2, Somerset Academy, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I recommend the board approve the application to Somerset Academy Acme Charter School for any and all of the reasons stated by the evaluation instruments and the overall assessment, and authorize the superintendent and or his designee to sign all related correspondence and documents.
Motion by Mrs. McQuinn, seconded by Mrs. Whitfield. Any discussion? Ms. Burrow.
I'm on again. The reason that I pulled this is uncharted territory for us. So we are recommending approval of the application. My question for staff, or through the superintendent, is when we approve them, are we going to help them to resolve the issues that were resulting in a do not meet the standard. So the deficiencies that are there, typically in the past we would deny the charter school. We are in the process of approving them because it is a high-performing charter. But does that mean that they will cure the deficiencies?
Yes, this designation does not alleviate us the responsibility of working with them through the financial issues. However, we've been informed by the DOE that we cannot deny them if they are classified as high-performing. So we are still working on our processes to maintain a level of accountability that the board would like us to maintain, but also work with the charter schools to move these things forward.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next one, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve the application for Somerset Academy Cypress Charter School for any and all the reasons stated by the evaluation instruments and the overall assessment, and authorize the superintendent and/or his designee to sign our related correspondence and documents.
Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, second by Mrs. Andrews. Ms. Brill.
And that was the same question for them, so thank you, Dr. FENNOY.
Yes, ma'am.
Next item, P1. I'm sorry, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. P1.
Yes, sir. I recommend the board approve the personnel agenda as revised.
Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Ms. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. PIR1.
Yes, sir. PIR1. I recommend the board approve the amendment to the real estate and purchase contract for acquisition of the improved parcel of land containing plus or minus 1.17 acres located at 520 Tony Penna Drive in Jupiter, Florida, adjacent to Jupiter Community High School, and authorize the board chair and superintendent to sign all necessary documents.
Motion by Mrs. McQuinn, second by Ms. Brill. Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. That takes us to the board discussion items. So the first item is, again, changing the process so that we can do this with votes. So just need a motion to approve the new process, to put these under on the agenda so we can vote on items. So we're just going to adopt this new procedure. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Ms. Brill. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Dr. Robinson?
What's the problem we're solving with this again?
That we can vote on an item that's on a board discussion. Otherwise, we have to discuss it 1 week, and then we have to get it on the agenda the next time. So this allows us, if we want to vote on something that we're putting on for board discussion, certainly the superintendent will weigh in and say, well, we don't want you to do that tonight because we have to get numbers or something, and he'll ask us to postpone that one. But that's the reason. So we can vote on items that, like the resolution tonight. If this procedure would have been in place last time, we would have been able to vote to go ahead and accept the resolution. We had to move it to another meeting to vote on it. That's the only change. Yes, ma'am. General Counsel.
Thank you. So the idea here is your current board policy has board discussion on items under workshops. Workshops don't have action under the APA. So to solve for that problem, the board discussion items will now be included during special meetings instead of during workshop times where action is allowed. I do recommend, as Mr. Barbieri may have alluded to, that we take a look at board policy for the future so that the board can vote to direct the superintendent in certain, for certain actions on board discussion items or other items that come up so that there is more of a voice of the board that's cohesive and clear to move issues forward rather than informal direction, which is now what is stated under the board policy, which is often difficult to decipher.
Yeah, so no more consensus. Now we actually have a motion and we vote.
Correct.
So the administration knows exactly what we'd like. Yes. Okay, Dr. Robinson?
Yeah, I'm just glad y'all said it.
Okay. BD2, I'm sorry, again, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. BD2, Mr. Shaw?
This was an item that I had asked us to put on the agenda to get an update of the compliance of charter schools with all of the requirements of Stoneman Douglas, and give us the authority then that if we needed to request that corrective action plans or anything would be given, And as of yesterday, Chief had indicated that, yes, the charter schools are in compliance for this year. So the only thing I'd like to ask is, and I talked with the superintendent yesterday about it, is just an update on where we will be going forward so that we can have the public record indicate our expectation for charter schools on being in compliance going into next year.
Chief Gitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, members of the board. Just an update on where we are with the charter schools. As of the last that I checked, was just very, very recently, 46 of the 51 charter schools have uploaded their contracts as we have requested them to do. And of those that are remaining, 3 of those are charter schools that we are responsible for security for, so we're working through our own contract procedures on those. One of the schools is deciding which security guard company they're going to use, so we're working closely with them. And then also there's one that is electing a guardian and have not made their choices. We're in the process now of sending them an additional letter to remind them of the obligations as we have put forward, and we're in the process of working with the legal department to get that done.
All right, so can you bring reports to us on a regular basis so we know the charter schools are complying? So
That'd be fine, yes.
And Dr. FENNOY, what you and I talked about yesterday, can you brief us on the letters that are being sent out for next year?
Yes, Kathy Villavicencio and Lynn Powell in the charter office. I requested them at the beginning of the year to create a procedure beginning in January to have documented notice to charter schools around the timeline towards compliance. We began that process in January. The letters have been sent out. We're also sending out letters for those who are in compliance. So we're documenting it, whether you've done it or you've not done it. And so the charge from my office to the team is that by the time we get to the end of the school year, we will know the status of all charter schools, with the effort for this board to not have to dip into their coffers again to cover them for the next school year.
All right, everybody okay? So we have no motion on that one. General Counsel, on the way we've got the board agenda structured, the next one, for example, Mrs. Whitfield's policy on voter registration drive, it says, I recommend the board discuss this subject and take action as needed. Do we really need to read that recommendation, or can we just open for board discussion and wait to see if there's a motion?
So we need to be careful that it's not a superintendent's recommendation. It's a motion. It actually turns into a discussion with a motion by the board member, and then a permissive vote by the board. That's basically
Okay, so on this one, for example, I could just call on Mrs. Whitfield to discuss, we discuss the item, and then if somebody wants to make a motion based on that discussion, we do it at that point.
Correct.
Okay, so the board clerk, you'll fix that in the future, so we're not, okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I brought this forward because we attended the Florida School Boards Association conference back in November, and there was a student from Leon County Schools who came forward and wanted to talk about a resolution that she had brought forward to her school board related to creating a policy on a voter registration drive. Now, we do this as a form of practice here. It's something that Ms. Fetterman's been working on for a few years. I'm very proud of it. I've actually had the opportunity to go and register students. Basically, what happens is any student can register to vote at 16 years of age. Any person can do it at 16 years of age. And then you're already ready to go when 18 comes along, which is great. So this student's name, just so you know, I brought it up so I could tell you, it's Madeline Fioc. And what she was asking was that school districts throughout the state actually create a policy around this. And so I thought it would be a really nice vote of support, since it's something we already do, if we were to put in policy that every year we would create voter registration drives using community partners, because we use League of Women Voters, and then just really anybody who's willing to help volunteers throughout the community to come and actually do voter registration drives at our schools. So like I said, we already do it. So what I would be looking for today would be a motion to create a policy around it, and then actually let Madeline know that we did that as a school board.
So you're making a motion?
You can have a discussion first if you want.
Okay, Ms. Brill?
So, I think it's very important. I'm not sure where I sit on having another policy because we have so many policies and we do it anyway. But I do think if we are going to look at that, the one thing, and being a member of the League of Women Voters, I thank them for their efforts on voter registration. An interesting conversation I had with some of the other League members when they were going to register students was that they said they felt like they looked like the grandma, signing up the kids to vote, and that they really think that we need to have more people registering that look like the students, meaning younger people. So I don't know if there's a way also for community service, if some of our older high school students could assist that way. So if we look at a policy, I'd like to see if there's a way that we could put that in there. But, I just feel like we have so many policies anyway, but that's just my own personal opinion. We do it. I think we do a great job with it. I thank Diana Fetterman for her efforts to that end. But I think and I know there's another discussion item coming up, and that might kind of play into this further.
Any other discussion? Mrs. Whitfield?
Okay, well, I will make a motion and see if anybody else wants to join me on creating a policy to make sure this is something that goes on in perpetuity.
Do we have a second? Dr. Robinson seconded the motion. Mr. Shaw?
Just, and this may be more in the form of an amendment. I'm not sure that we couldn't just place some language in some existing policy if we needed to that would cover this, or I think staff could look. It may be possible that an administrative directive to schools saying do this would save us having to create a policy. So if we could amend it to give it either way on that.
Ms. Brill?
Well, and as a follow-up to what Mr. Shaw is saying, then maybe if we can have staff come back to us and let us know, can it be put into as an administrative policy or something to the schools, and have staff report back? Because I don't want to see us put it aside and not do it. But, if it can fit into another policy or if it could be an administrative directive, that might be the better way to go.
Dr. Robinson?
So in my worldview, the policies will, in addition to things mandated by law, state the belief system of the board, and administrative directives state the belief system of the superintendent. I personally would prefer, I'm happy to hear what staff says, but just based on that worldview, I would like to see it in policy because I think it is that important. Like at least as important as the census. So,
Mrs. Andrews?
Thank you, and I do agree that it needs to be in policy, but I do think it needs to be fleshed out a bit so that we can know exactly what's going on. I just see the registration by different folks at some of the high schools, not just the League of Women Voters, different organizations actually coming within our schools, doing great jobs in registering our young people. So we just need to flesh it out a little bit, but I do want to keep it in a policy format because it's something that will outlast all of us.
Mr. Shaw, so there's a motion on the floor to create a policy. Did you want to amend that somehow?
No, I think that the discussion covered the direction on that.
Okay. General Counsel, you have any issues with this?
No, if we had been talking about an administrative directive, we don't have those anymore, so I would have made that point of order.
I think I said a bulletin, so you know what? I think it's clear what we're going to do.
Ms. McQuinn? Oh, yes, sir, Mr.
I
Superintendent.
just want to add, I don't remember which one said it now, maybe Dr. Robinson, whoever it is, I give you credit, about the school organization, student government. That's kind of what they're about. So there you go. Thank you, Mrs. Brill.
Dr. Robinson? I'm sorry, the superintendent asked to chime in on this, so certainly.
I would ask the board, it definitely sounds like we were moving in a direction. I would like for the board to consider to give us the opportunity to see about existing policy first before we begin to create a whole new set of policies. That would be my only ask.
Dr. Robinson, you want to make a motion to amend the motion to?
yeah, so let me first make a comment because even before the superintendent said that, I think that the conversation went from directing that a policy be created to directing the exploration of the policy. That's how I heard it. And so based upon that, I would offer an amendment to the motion to direct the superintendent to explore the creation of a policy on voter registration drives and bring that information back to the board. It's your motion. You gonna second? Okay.
We have a second on that? Erica second. Mrs. Whitfield second that. So all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? The amendment, okay, the amendment passes 7-0. The main motion, any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay. Anyway, we got it. Dr. Robinson.
So to continue talking about voter registration, you will see attached a newspaper article actually from West Virginia. 24 West Virginia high schools have registered 100% of their eligible senior class to vote, which I think elevated my expectations. And so just to continue on with this conversation, I would like for us to set our goal to be 100% registration of eligible students and adults on campus, because we talk about registering students and we don't talk about the adults on campus. Now, I'm not going to try to force somebody to register if they, no, but I think our goal should be 100% instead of just having drives, right? The goal should be 100%. You know, somebody's going to say no, so we won't get there. But I think the goal should be 100% of eligible persons in our schools. So I would like to offer an amendment to add that to the previous vote. How about that? Yeah, I know, right? That was messy, right?
Mrs. Whitfield.
So I see in the article here, it says that they were giving an award for their efforts if they got over 85% from just skimming it. Is that kind of what you're thinking, is to sort of go for some sort of an award process?
I wasn't even going there. That's part of the process, maybe to get there. I just wanted us to elevate our expectations. So.
Ms. Brill?
So I think that we're going to have a lot of robust conversations about how we get to that point. I think that's a great idea. I want to make sure that when we say 100%, that it's 100% of all students. So all means all. That means our English language learners and our ESC students also. And it's a part of a great conversation that as we talk about wanting to teach more civics, we can build a whole discussion, a civics discussion around it. So that's why when you bring back the policy, I mean, I see this as blossoming into something a whole lot bigger than simply voting. So thank you.
All right, so we have a, I think we have an amendment to the original motion.
I don't even want to, just let them take it and fix the.
Okay.
I'll respond to that, if you don't mind. Yeah, I think the target goals is definitely something we can work towards. I actually like this in the sense that we can actually work with our student representative. It can be a joint effort. They would actually probably take the lead, I would argue. And then we can set goals and they can, celebrate and provide incentives as we start reaching that. So in lieu of putting a 100% goal in the policy, I would ask that you would allow us to work towards that goal, because I'm fearful of those hard numbers, and then what happens if we don't meet it? Do we start penalizing? It just gets into all that kind of stuff. But I hear you loud and clear, it's on the record that if we work with the Student Government Association, that would be our ultimate goal, and I would be more than willing to work with that group to do that.
Okay, so since we do have a motion on the floor, would you please withdraw it so we don't have to vote on it?
Yeah, whatever it was, I withdrew it.
Yes, you did. It was seconded by Mrs. Andrews. All right, so it's been withdrawn. Mrs. Whitfield, BD5.
Thank you. So I want to start this little piece of conversation around the selection of the board chair and vice chair to say that I think we do a really good job. I think we have a very cohesive board, and I think everyone, we get along really well, and I'm very proud of us. One of the things, though, that has always kind of just not made sense to me is that when we go to select our chair and vice chair, we do it without any discussion at all. There's never a discussion between the people on the dais because we're not allowed to. And so when that discussion doesn't happen, it's sort of like we come in here and everyone just sort of looks at each other to see what's going to happen. And I think what we could do, so I talked to Andrea Messina at the Florida School Boards Association, and we talked a little bit about what does it mean to be a chair and a vice chair, and what kind of requirements we think as a board this person should fulfill. So like what their job description is, what the duties of a chairman and vice chair are. And she suggested, which I think is a really cool idea, and I wanted to bring it forward to you guys, is that in some counties, before they choose the chair and vice chair during the election, which we have to have, they actually sit down as a group, possibly during a retreat or a meeting beforehand, and kind of talk about it ahead of time. And then if there's anything kind of coming up that year, like say you have like a referendum that's going forward or any kind of special instances, something that one person might be better than another person to kind of lead, that would be discussed. And so then as a group, you really talk about and be more purposeful about it. One of the things that she said she could do, if you're interested in having Andrea do this, she could lead a discussion at our next retreat just to discuss like being more purposeful about our selection process. She is working in Martin County over the next year or 6 months for their superintendent search process. So she said if we coordinated it when she was already down here, it would be very, very cheap to have her come and lead this discussion. So I thought it would be good during a retreat. And then we also have our strategic planning process coming up, so I think this is a good chance to set expectations. My final point is that we may potentially have 2 new members coming on as school board members this year. So knowing that, I think it would be really good for us to set our expectations as a board early. So I wanted to put that out for you guys to see if you want to have this discussion kind of in a more robust fashion this year at some point in the next few months during maybe our retreat.
I think it's a great idea, because you're right. We come here, in a regular election, you get to tell why you think you could do the job best and try and get the votes from the voters. In this one, we sit here and look at each other and, well, who's going to be nominated? And I didn't know he wanted it. I didn't know she wanted it. It's like we should probably do something. So that's a great idea, Mrs. Whitfield. If we can get her down here to help us with figuring out a way to do that, so we can whatever makes it work a little better than the suspense. Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, the Chief of Staff, Ed Tierney, had already approached me around getting ready for the potential of new board members coming on board and having a workshop at that time. I think it'd be, I think that if the board would like something like this, I'm sure Mr. Tierney would be glad to put that as part of that agenda as he develops that when the time comes.
Okay, so everybody's shaking their head, and we can't take a consensus because the general counsel, but I think, Mr. Superintendent, you kind of get the flavor of what we... Yeah, okay, good.
I was working for him.
Dr. Robinson?
The other thing is, this came up years ago. I want to also look at other methods. So, like, the county rotates but kind of doesn't or something. Like, I'm not really clear what they do. But I'm curious to know if other school boards have other practices, right? You shaking your head no?
I do know.
Okay, Ms. Andrews knows.
Yes, I've spoken to other school board, and they do it differently. Some do it the way that we've done it through just a general election. Some of them do rotation. So that would be something that we should look at the other school districts and find out exactly what they do. Because some of them do it.
Mrs. Whitfield and Ms. McQuinn?
I actually asked Commissioner McKinley about this because I wanted to know more about how they do it, and here's what she said. She said that they simply changed the name from chair to mayor around 2012 because the mayor title carried more weight politically. The position is still voted on by commissioners. There's no real rule on rotation, but historically it's always been the vice mayor moving into the mayor role, and then the vice mayor was usually the chair of the Solid Waste Authority. I didn't realize they have a bigger kind of expansive chairmanship over time. So that's sort of how they do it. But the rotation is something that they do and do practice.
Ms. McQuinn?
So all of this discussion, when you saw us nodding our heads, to me, that's what we're doing when we bring a consultant in to have this discussion, rather than now.
Go ahead, Dr. FENNOY.
Just as a point of clarification, so the statute would still require you to vote for those positions anyway. So it's still a vote on your part.
Right, yeah.
Dr. Robinson?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Mrs. Whitfield, because I was trying to understand how they did it. I also know that even though they expect to rotate, sometimes they get nasty and don't. So just to say, that just because that's the expectation doesn't mean it must happen. But as part of this this retreat, to bring that information forward too, and how does that work wherever they do it that way? If she could bring her expertise to share with us pros and cons for every method. There must be some other methods too, but whatever method she knows about, pros and cons for all of them.
Ms. Whitfield and then Mrs. Andrews.
If you all are interested, she did actually send me existing job descriptions, responsibilities of a school board member that she has, and then she did share with me that in Orange County, I think they're the only one, they actually elect their chair through the voter process. So the voters actually do it. Yeah, there's apparently a story there we'll share later, but so they have that through that process there. But I can share with you the job descriptions. I think it's really, to me, I think it could be a very rich discussion around what this board stands for and what we want that person and people to do over time and the responsibilities. So I'll share that with Ms. Bass, and she can pass it along.
Mrs. Andrews?
And I think it's a fabulous time for us to talk about who we are and what our expectations are and where we're going as to how we see ourselves fitting in any one of those roles. And sometimes many of us may not want it, so it gives us a chance to talk about it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, so we'll move on to BD 6, Ms. McQuinn. Was there a motion on that? We just.
Did you have a motion on that?
You want to make a motion to bring this lady down here to our retreat?
Absolutely, yeah, to our next retreat. Let's invite the FSBA Executive Director, Andrea Messina, to come. That would be my motion.
Seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Any further discussion? All in favor? Go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
Just one quick comment on that, and I think we need to be specific because of the topic that we have. I think that this needs to be Andrea and not anybody else from FSBA staff. So I think we need to specify when it's scheduled that Mrs. Messina be the person who comes.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 7-0. BD 7, Ms. McQuinn? BD 6, I'm sorry, BD 6.
So I had two. Am I doing the 360? I moved to another place on the agenda. This is the scheduling. Okay, I've got it. This won't require a motion. We talked in a previous meeting, or a couple of meetings ago, about the requests that have come from board members or the board. We've all agreed to have workshops or information from staff. And so I think Dr. FENNOY suggested that staff was going to put together the requests over the past few years, bring them to us, and then we could prioritize as a board what is most important to us now. So that's the first part. And then the second is, when that comes to us, that we have to look at our schedule and say, well, for this coming year, this is a priority, so do we need to have more workshop time other than the days that we are meeting currently to fit all that in?
So, Ms. McQuinn, in anticipation of your discussion item, the superintendent and I and the chief of staff spoke about it so that we could get some ideas on how they could do this for us. So I believe, Mr. Superintendent, you wanted Mr. Tierney to tell us how the project would work with respect to the new workshops, old workshops, prior requests, and all that.
Chairman Barbieri, Vice Chair Mr. Shaw, school board members, Dr. FENNOY. I'm pleased to have an opportunity to briefly address our workshop scheduling process, and I'm going to respectfully suggest that it's time for a global look at how we request and schedule workshops. So a very brief history. In 2017, we conducted 45 workshops for the board. 2018, there were 33 workshops. 2019, 33. We currently have 5 workshops scheduled for this semester, extrapolated outcomes to 10. So that's a very large variance. And while we don't think there's an exact correct number of workshops, that variance combined with the discussion item led us to think it was time to look at how we're scheduling that. So our suggestion is we take a look at the 111 workshops we've done over the past 4 years. We look at the workshops that were not done. We use our best judgment on what will help the board with effective governance, and then bring a draft list for an annual list of workshops to the board for the board to then review. We are not interested in hearing this. We are interested in having this. And then we have a finalized list of workshops for a year that's approved and then scheduled. And then additionally, if we deem some workshops to be required annually, third grade reading, equity, human trafficking, rather than be incumbent on you to remember to request again and then schedule at the day after that workshop is done, it's just immediately put on the following calendar's schedule in order to be done again.
And board members can still add during the year that if the board wants a workshop that's not on that list, we can decide that we want to do that and add that.
Of course.
Yes. Okay. All right. Mrs. Whitfield.
Does your schedule account for you guys setting up workshops too? Will there be space in there for, because I know like certain workshops, none of us requested, they just needed to happen at that time, so.
Some are policy, some are finance, some are board requested, but I think if we plan for a year out, we'll have that much more time to plan, and then it will just be a matter of, discipline and thought and word when planning and briefing. If they can't all be 20 slides with 3 minutes per slide, so we'll just have to work in preparing for board meetings.
Just to clarify for my fellow board members, I brought that list to Dr. FENNOY after and I kind of looked at all the things that I had said and really thought none of them were important anymore. They just didn't really fit as anything that was, I was dying to hear about. So maybe we can speed up the process by saying if there's stuff on that list you're not interested in hearing about anymore, maybe we just let them know ahead of time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think only thing I would add to Mr. Tierney's comments is that the goal would be to start with all of the mandatory workshops. So again, the chief finance officers, general counsel, we know that some things have to be done. So you fill that in first, and then we look at, okay, what is a reasonable time frame? Is it 4, 5 workshops? I think there's still a reality similar to what I think the census team did great today was, condensing, getting to the meat of the presentation. The board can have all the backup documents necessary so that we can get more information to the board during workshops and for the public to see. But I think if we create the template and then the board can fill in wherever they see fit, withdraw wherever they see fit, but the mandatories will be the mandatory as part of the year-long calendar. That then allows all of the different divisions to work towards the date. And then my expectation of the team is, if this is the date you're presenting, you must be ready. There is no pulling it back. So everyone has a year to plan, we get ready, and then that way no board member is left without getting the information that he or she needs.
All right. And one other thing that I also didn't mention is in working with the board clerk, we understand that there's a lot of questions that may not have been answered that have been submitted by board members. So the board office is currently working through those old questions to find out which ones were answered and which ones weren't, and then going to notify you if you still want your question answered. They'll make sure that they ask you if you still want that question answered, or if you've, like Mrs. Whitfield, it was a long time ago and you don't care anymore to get an answer to it because you've already got the information somewhere else along the way. So they'll be doing that also.
One last comment.
Yes, sir.
I think this is also important. I give direction to the team. In some cases, the board members may not want those workshops because they've already received the information. From my perspective, the entire board needs the information. So you may have got the information. So I often tell the team, even if you happen to see Ms. McQuinn in the hallway and she asked a question, it's important for everyone else to know that as well. So that way, you're all informed, you have the same information, and there's not a perception that one person is getting more information than others.
So if I ask you where we're going to lunch, I got to tell everybody?
This is related.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So I'm really glad Dr. FENNOY made those comments in particular, because I was thinking, really, what is the purpose of a workshop, right? For me, and it kind of morphed into the purpose of discussion items. For me, it is very important that we have dialogue around the issues that we think are important, right? I'm trying to break myself of the habit of sending in so many questions on board items, because I was sending in those questions in part in hopes that it would precipitate some collective thought up here, right? And so since a lot of it just really ended up seeming to be, I needed that information for me to personally process the agenda item, then I just started asking staff instead of sending it in. But there's still a lot of things that deserve that collective thought, right? And so, yeah, so with that in mind, and when I looked at that list, I think disproportionately the workshops that had not been scheduled were mine, I think. And I also recall thinking that most of them I had gotten the information that I wanted anyway, right? So I kind of crossed them off my mental list. I also appreciate you saying, Mr. Tierney, about the annual workshops, because I was going to bring that up, not just third grade reading, right? Like reading. What are we doing and how are we going to get there, since, we know it's so important. I want to add to that choice, the global perspective of where we're going with our choice programs. We need to look at that. I think that there was a workshop that I asked for with all kinds of detail that staff probably thought was just onerous, but I still think that the board needs to see that big picture. And I think that once we see the big picture with transportation implications and all those other things, that there each year after that, it won't be such a giant task, but we still need to see where we're going and seeing where the holes are. So I appreciate this discussion item coming up, and I look forward to scheduling those workshops, and especially those annual ones that we know are important for the board input.
All right, any other discussion? If not, it looks like the direction is that staff is working on the schedule. So next item, Mrs. McQuinn, BRD 7.
So to the subject of workshops, I think this would be short. My appointment to the Academic Advisory Committee, Ellen Van Arsdale always shares the minutes of the advisory meetings with me, and I read them. And one of the presentations that they received in the past couple of months was the 360 program that, and the reason you hear me, I'm stammering a little bit with this, is because I know it's the social, emotional, behavioral, I'm putting all that together, health, yes, student health. I simply asked the question. I have since learned that there have been some issues that staff is working with individual schools or school levels about. That's not my question at all. I just simply want to know a little bit about what it is.
So earlier this school year, the Department of Education added an additional 5 hours of requirement for mental behavioral health for all students in grades 6 to 12, as well as human trafficking, K-12, and substance abuse, K-12. So districts were kind of left with what type of product would we use, what did we have in-house to create to be able to address this upcoming year. So the district team, Dr. Sheffield, Ms. Fetterman, their teams researched numerous products that were off the shelf, and the one that we found to best meet our needs was Suite 360. This program was developed by a number of professionals in the mental health field, being used in a number of districts throughout the country, as well as the most cost-effective and easiest use to implement in this year and for next year in case something else comes better in the future. If there's anything, Dr. Sheffield or Ms. Fennerman, you want to add?
No, and it's a platform, no more than it's a platform that our senior high schools are already familiar with using, because they use it for Edgenuity, which is the platform for credit recovery. And it's just that I do want to thank our guidance team, because they spent a lot of time really looking in regards to what was already out there. Because when the mandate came down, the Department of Curriculum there had already started with Ms. Fetterman and the team developing our modules to use here in-house. But as we navigated through what the requirements were, we were not as comfortable in regards to the content as this was all coming in new to us. So we wanted to go out and venture out and look at the experts, or those that were already very much familiar as it pertains to the requirements and had the package, to where we can work more closely and defined with the way that we were going to deliver that instruction. So the way that we're delivering that instruction right now, it's where it's teacher delivery, whole group, not by individual students, and we're monitoring and to see how it's going and so forth. And all schools have received the necessary training. We did the training here on site here at the district office, and we had 3 schools that were not able to attend, but we've made certain that those 3 schools have received the necessary trainings. And along with training and having a contact person at the school site, it was also important that district level staff, including ourselves, along with principal supervisors and so forth, Dr. FENNOY also participated in that training with us, that we all received that training prior to rolling the training out to school staff, to where we will be able to support, because this is new for all of us. So we do have a support system, and we are dealing with the individual needs as they arise, because it is a 2-year contract. Ms.
Let
Fetterman.
me ask a question if I can. So it's 5 hours? So it's 5 hours per student? Is that the way it works? The student has to have 5 hours of this?
In grades 6 through 12.
So how did?
For the mental health.
So
in
the
addition, on top of that, instruction in human trafficking, and on top of that, instruction in substance abuse.
So is this done on one day, so that the teacher teaches for 5 hours this
No,
one?
each school had to, Mr. Barbieri, each school had to develop what is called an action plan in regards to how they were going to meet that 5-hour requirement. We did not put them in a box to say this is how it's going to be done. We allow the principal to establish their team at their school to decide what that 5 hours would look like. And our elementary and middle schools were doing pretty well in regards to establishing what that protocol will look like. We found senior high school was having more of a challenge in regards to developing their action plan. So what we did with the senior high school, per their request, this Department of Curriculum actually worked with senior high school principals this past week at their division meeting to look at their plans and to provide feedback and to help navigate. So it's individual school in regards to how they will meet that requirement. And we do have, along with that, with the training that they received in regards to rolling this all out, they also received the protocol that we would use here at the district level as it pertains to the monitoring and the accountability, because we do have to report back to the state in regards to meeting these mandates, and that piece is already built in.
Before Mrs. Whitfield asks her question, I think I cut you off, Ms. Fetterman. Did you have something you wanted to add to?
Just as questions have been arising, we have been able to assist schools as concerns have come up. This is certainly a new mandate that's come down from the state, but we have helped them. Suite 360 has also been very good about coming down, providing additional trainings as we've needed them. Since the timeline is new, we've had only the half of a year in order to implement it, but next year we'll be able to spread out the instruction across the course of the entire year.
All right, thank you. Mrs. Whitfield?
So I was just thinking, this is really new for everyone, this whole mental health piece, and really with the referendum and the BHPs, it would be neat maybe to have at the end of this year sort of what happened in this year of mental health and like how we're spending the money that we got from the referendum. I think could be really valuable for everyone. So not to stress out Mr. Tierney who just walked out, but to add another workshop to really do like how did the year go? Because I would love to know kind of an overarching, did we do a good job and what are we going to do next?
Ms. Whitfield, let me respond to that. It is already in the plans. It's part of, same with security. We've got to keep you updated because to that very point, and even in my one-on-one speech with the board members, you're giving us ideas. The state is still changing mandates. We're all trying to figure it out. I talked to a board member today about someone that a presenter that she saw at another event that could help us. So again, this is going to be an all hands on deck trying to figure out how this works. And then at some point, we got to get feedback from our parents, the actual end users. We got to see if it's really working for our communities and children. I think in the superintendent's task force on Black student achievement, that's now one of their priorities is mental health. And so I think it is absolutely, we're going to make sure we do a good job of keeping you up to breast and getting your feedback, because you're going to hear from the people on the ground probably before some of us will.
And I think I asked Ms. Issa to come up because there was another important component to when we were looking at the product in which we wanted to use. Along with this was an intervention piece that was going to assist our school sites. Some of our schools had already went out and was using it along with their in-school suspension, but it was advantageous for us to try to make certain that if we had something that we know we're working in select schools, if we can be inclusive to put it in all schools, then why not look at it? And Ms. Issa will talk on the intervention component.
Yeah, we're going to be rolling that out with all of the secondary schools so that we can make that a component within ISS or other areas on their campuses. We're in the development stages of what that'll look like, but that was included with the Suite 360, so we're going to take advantage of that. And like I said, we can bring that forward when we come back and we update you on the other pieces, but we're very excited. Like I said, Dr. Sheffield said, some of the schools had already purchased that component, and now we have it available for all the schools.
And it provides instruction, one-on-one instruction to students based on a particular issue or challenge they're having, and if they've received a referral, it's tied to that exact offense that they get that intervention and support. And there's a lot of good research behind this to show to reduce the recidivism of that occurring again in the future.
Okay, any other discussion? Mrs. Andrews?
Just a quickie. I was out at Wellington, Seminole Ridge, a little bit of everywhere a lot. And I always ask to see the co-located professional, the mental health folks, as well as behavior specialists. And these people are excited about what they do. And they have been intertwined within the school with the principal and all the leaders, and they are ready to go. That's something that I'm quite impressed with when I meet them all. Every time I go to a school, I ask to see the new people that are actually working the mental health piece for our children, and it's pretty exciting.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Robinson, BD 9.
So, you may have seen a lot of news coverage about regarding discriminatory actions based on people's hair, right? The one that I remember set the alarm off for me was a young man who was about to wrestle, that they forced him to cut his locks to wrestle. And so I've attached some articles. It seems to be coming up more often. I'm not aware of any that have happened in Florida, definitely not aware of anything that's happened in Palm Beach County. But again, because I think policy proclaims to the world our belief system, my request is that we look at explicitly prohibiting hair discrimination in our policies.
I'm sorry. I was looking out there on an issue that's, forget about it. Ms. Brill, then Ms. Whitfield.
Thank you, and I thank you, Dr. Robinson, for bringing that up. Legal had sent us something about a bill that's in Tallahassee, and it was actually, I think, yesterday that I spoke to our general counsel, and I said I'd like to see that added to our policy regardless of what happens in Tallahassee, because this board does have a very strong and strong sentiment that any discrimination should not be allowed, and so we need to add it to our bullying also. I think we need it in the bullying policy, and I would completely support amending the policy to prohibit that.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I just wanted to say that I was also fired up about this, and I love that you brought it up. I think this is a great opportunity for us to say where we stand. This has happened throughout the country, and it blows my mind, especially as someone who spends a long time growing her hair out. I can't imagine somebody cutting it off and how upset I would be. So, I would love to see this added in, like Ms. Brill said, even without the state, coming down with their decision. I think we should say where we stand on this, and I think, it's very simply added, so we should do it.
Dr. FENNOY?
So I agree with this. This is a serious subject. However, I'm a little offended that you didn't consider Dr. LaCava, Ed Tierney, and I as the follically challenged I just messed with you.
I wasn't going to respond to that.
Mrs. Andrews?
Because it's truly really serious, and some people think that they may get away with that, so it needs to be etched in stone in policy, because it's not the right thing to do to anybody.
Mrs. Rico?
Thank you. And I did issue a memorandum to the board on this subject in response to Dr. Robinson's inquiry. The treatment there was about the pending bill, but also attached an analysis of prior cases, both in the employment arena as well as in the school arena, and 11th Circuit federal cases that have held. So there was actually a hair-cutting case in the 11th Circuit that did hold that this school district was not allowed to force a student to cut their hair. So we will look into this. If we have a vote to direct us to I would love a motion and a vote to direct us to do the work.
Dr. Robinson?
I second it. She seconded it right quick.
Okay. Okay, I offer a motion that we amend our policies to explicitly prohibit hair discrimination.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. I pulled the last one. I had some questions that I've discussed with Mrs. Paul and Mrs. Garrison, so if we have nothing else, we need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Mrs. Andrews. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So the next meeting that we go to